Welcome to the Nobody Guide to Life, where we provide tips and tools for personal growth, personal development, and your spiritual journey that you can use right now in your everyday life. Don't forget, you can always find out more about what we're doing at nobodiesview.com or thenobodybible.com, or you can check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View if you want to learn a little more, to put something into the show and join the conversation. We'd love to have you. Our show notes are at nobodiesview.com. And if you like what you hear on the show, we'd certainly welcome a subscription or a review. It would be much appreciated. So we had quite a collection of holidays this past weekend. Our Christian friends are in the Easter season, and our Jewish friends are celebrating Passover. So it's a busy time out there. So if you haven't already, get on the internet and start looking up some of these holidays. There's, you think you know them, but there's all kinds of interesting tidbits that you can take away from them and use in your own life. Try a new recipe, even if it doesn't come from your tradition. If you think they might be open to it, you can always ask a neighbor or a friend about their seasonal celebrations and see what a day on the calendar can really mean to someone. People are sometimes more willing to open up and talk about their traditions, especially when the season is here. So give it a try. Now, whether you celebrate at this time of year or not, there's a lot of holiday energy out there. So get into it, do a little exploring. So anyway, with everything swirling around out there, it was really hard to choose a topic for today's show. There were so many options, and I knew I wanted to do something around either the Easter or Passover season. But I finally decided I really wanted to focus on something from the Passover tradition. And specifically what I want to talk about is the unleavened bread that is eaten this time of year called matzah. So if you don't know a lot about matzah, it doesn't have a lot of flavor. It really doesn't have a lot of pizzazz. But after some research, what I found out is it really does have a lot to teach us, and I think it can provide something really significant for us this time of year. So you can read about matzah in the Bible in a few places, but it's especially prominent in the book of Exodus. So the story, in short, the two-line version, the Israelites are fleeing Egypt fast, and they couldn't wait for the dough to rise. They were making provisions to take with them on their way out of town. So they had some dough there, and they had to bake it quickly, and they took off. They took off from Egypt to escape their captivity. So in that sense, I think matzah has come to symbolize that flight of freedom, that just in time, that getting away from a difficult situation, liberation. So, a lot of people know that meaning for matzah, but I discovered that there's another way that commentators like to think about that simple piece of matzah. There's another powerful symbol of what that plain baked cracker can represent for all of us. So when you look at it, you can see that it's flat. So as opposed to bread that's normally eaten, that you get from the store in a loaf, that bread is puffy and light. But when you look at these contrasting types, so you have the flatbread of the matzah versus the puffier bread, if you look hard enough, you can see a parallel to the ego in our lives. Let's talk about that for a moment. So many times we walk around puffed up. We let our ego rise in a lot of situations. And maybe sometimes we act out of arrogance or a sense of self-importance. We demand respect from others, even though we're not ready to give that same respect. Maybe we have a desire to be right all the time. Maybe we dig our heels in an argument and we just puff up and puff up. I don't know you, so I can't say how ego works in your life. But I'm just assuming here that you're human, so you probably have moments like this. When we look at matzah, then from this lens, I think it conveys to us a sense of humility, a sense of staying humble. So instead of getting all puffed up and mighty, maybe the symbol of matzah is we stay low and we kind of take it all in. So if you've ever had matzah, that's what it does best at the table. It's a great canvas for showcasing toppings, right? So it stays low, and then you can put jam on it. You can I've heard of people making pizza out of it because it's a good way. It's a good place to pile sauce and cheese. Think about how that theme plays in your life. So think about your relationships right now, your relationships at work, at home, at school. See where you can identify times in life where you get a little puffed up. I've made some bread in my day, and I've been fortunate to watch others make bread. And I think, for a lot of us, the exciting part is when the dough is left to rise. I think there's an excitement about that, right? I mean, you don't really know where it's going to go or how high it's going to get. I remember as a kid, my mom would put dough on the stove, and I keep coming back into the kitchen to see how much progress it had made because, it really interested me. And I remember being told, don't touch it, let it sit. That phrase about letting it sit, I was thinking about that. It takes us back to something I think we said at the start of the show about digging our heels in. And often when we're in a disagreement with someone, we want to be right. We need to be right. We'll do anything to be right. We sit, we let it sit. We sit right where we are. We're stubborn. We even become determined not to move, no matter what argument comes our way. So in that place with no movement, our ego inflates, it rises, it puffs up. Maybe we say like, no one's going to tell me, what to do, or one issue, one slight that comes our way. It can last a whole lifetime. But what would happen if we weren't so stuck in our ways? What would happen if instead of digging in firm and inflating, just kind of sitting in that stuck place, we decided to be a little nimbler, a little lighter, like that bread that went out from Egypt? The speed at which the Israelites had to leave Egypt meant there wasn't time for that dough to rise. There wasn't time to think or get bogged down in old hurts and injustices. There was just time to do what had to be done, move on from that situation. And I think that's the point. It's when we sit still with our ego and stew and fester, that's when we inflate. With bread dough, when it's just sitting there, the yeast has time to eat the sugars in the flour. When that happens, it's that release of carbon dioxide that causes the dough to rise. So I guess in one way of thinking, we could say, don't give life that option. Don't let old hurts, old arguments, old disagreements, don't let those things sit and fester. If you can, be light. Move on. Don't give that ego time to rise. An important point here is I'm not saying to you, don't have feelings. I'm not saying you're not right in whatever argument you're having right now. I'm not saying we shouldn't get angry. I'm not advocating a who cares attitude. What I'm suggesting is that things happen, and it's the amount of time we sit and dwell on them that determines how much our ego inflates. It is possible to have a disagreement with someone and then drop it instead of letting it rise over days, weeks, years, until it takes over your life. So that brings the two meanings of matzah together, I think. If we let go of a slight or an insult, we humble ourselves and listen to what others have to say, or we give them a moment to shine instead of trying to puff ourselves up, we're practicing humility, even if it's just in a really small way. So we'll call that the first meaning of matzah. And when we do that, when we drop that, we drop a lot of anger. We drop a lot of frustration. We drop that need to be right. That brings with it, I guess we could call it a gift of lightness. So there's a relief from the binding nature of always having to be on the defensive or be correct. That's the second meaning of matzah. So that's freedom. So this week's tool for the spiritual and personal growth tool belt is humble matzah and everything it symbolizes. So if you want to dive right in on this and practice, head to the store and find a box of matzah or make your own. I'm sure there's a lot of really interesting recipes out there for it. So here's an exercise you can try. Put a piece of matzah on a plate in front of you. But instead of just diving right in, don't just crack it up and eat it. Be more mindful about it. Meditate on it. Notice how flat it is, receptive. It doesn't have a grand presence. It doesn't make a big splash. It's just kind of there waiting, right? So think about a place in your life where you could probably be a little more humble. Where can you deflate your ego? And then see yourself at the end of that journey of humility. How do you feel? Do you feel happier? Do you feel freer? Really relish that feeling, because that feeling of lightness is pretty special. Then go get butter and salt or jam and then dig in. See how that works for you. Take a look at humble matzah and see if it can do its work in your life. So that's our show for today. Let us know how that tip is working for you. Join us at nobodiesview.com or thenobodybible.com or Twitter and Facebook at nobodiesview, and let us know. And please, if you like what you hear, consider a subscription or a review. We'd appreciate it. I look forward to hearing from you, and have a great week.